Do not adjust your digital device. What you are about to see and hear may shock and appall you. Join our hosts as they encounter countless thrills, spills, chills, and hilarity as they explore the very weirdest in pop culture. The following media is so strange, so beyond the scope of what is normal, it will make you ask the question, why does this exist? Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Why Does This Exist? I'm Chris.
And I'm Rob.
And today we have an excellent show lined up for you. We are going to be talking about a childhood cartoon that is beloved, strange, and filled with queer stories that definitely flew over your head. It's about a wallaby, a steer, who was raised by wolves, and a turtle. And this launched the careers of several very prominent voice actors, and even entire shows. Actually, most of the crew ended up working on SpongeBob later on, including the creator Steven Hillenburg. We are talking about the fourth Nicktoon ever created, the iconic Rocko's Modern Life, which features some of the B-52s in the theme song. Pretty interesting, pretty neat. Now, for those of you who don't know, and for some of you who do, we are Why Does This Exist? We are a podcast that speaks about the very weirdest in pop culture, whether it's a cartoon like we will do in a few minutes, anything regarding pop culture, or anything strange in general, a weird TV show, a weird comic book, a movie of some kind, bands, and just various musical acts that have just, well, not exactly fit the norm. Card games, trading card games, pop culture things in general, comic books, you name it. We will discuss it at some point or another, whether it's happened, not happened, past, present, future. We're on it. And sometimes we're the only source that you can really come to for this. So that's interesting in itself. We are the leading experts on John Dillerman, which was episode 4. That's a show about, that's a children's show from Denmark about a man with a giant penis that he uses for his everyday life to help people, or he tries to. Yeah, it's a long story. Maybe you should just check out episode 4 of this show.
Yeah.
You can help support the show in a couple of ways. You can head over to our YouTube channel, which has not been updated in a long time, and just maybe if you subscribed and showed some common courtesy, and just let us know that you're listening to us, we're out there, and you're going to help spread the word, then just maybe we'll start updating a few things. All right, fine. I'm not going to hold you guys hostage. The truth is, I'm a jackass, and I don't have a lot of time because I have a regular job and a nice wife and all those nice things that go along with it, and friends and a support system. In other words, I'm busy and people love me.
In other words, you're living a modern life.
Yes, I am. Well, I don't know. Modern times are pretty bleak for most people. I would say I got it pretty good. Not in the Ric Flair way, so no, my shoes do not cost more than your house.
Oh.
But then again, everything is pretty decent over here. I got a roof over my head. I'm doing all right. I got a trip to Portugal coming up. Things are pretty good in my in my household. But if you want to help support the show, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's Why Does This Exist with a question mark. You can also give us some money at Patreon. That's patreon.com/Why Does This Exist. Oh, actually, I had to send you some money, Mr. Rob, because we actually finally got paid from our podcast partners at Spreaker,
Wow.
who we hook up with. We got paid from our ad sales, which means we got a whole whopping $10.75.
Wow.
So I owe you a cappuccino.
Nice.
With milk. So there's that.
Or one egg.
Or one egg. Yeah, there's a lot of things that we could do for you there. You might even get some cinnamon or some cocoa powder on top. Maybe you get the fancy cappuccino with the cinnamon stick. I don't know. You go
Oh.
to the good part of town to get your cappuccino.
The
You
right
sit
side of the
down.
tracks.
You go down to St. Mark's Place, and you go down to Bleecker Street rather, and you sit over in the Green Cafe. You sit under the statue of Nefertiti, in Cafe Reggio. That's my old stomping grounds, and that is the best cappuccino you will ever get in the world. And you heard it here first. But don't sit under the statue of Nefertiti. That's my spot.
Oh.
Unless we're meeting there, then you could sit, because I'll be there. And there's that.
All right.
I've written many stories and articles in there. And I've also lied to a few people about what I actually do for a living in that same booth. I've also given them fake names. So if you're watching, so if you're listening, Henry the Doctor is not real. I am not from Canada. I did not live in Manitoba. There is no doctor named Henry from Manitoba.
There is no bathroom.
No, there is a bathroom. But anyway, you could support us on Patreon. That's patreon.com/whydoesthisexist. You could give us as little as $1, and you can have access to the Discord server, where you can actually sit down and hang out with us. And maybe we'll let you be on the show. You can pitch ideas to us. Maybe we'll listen to some. Maybe we'll listen to others. Maybe we won't listen to anybody. And maybe you just hate the show and you want to hate listen. People do that now. Well, actually, more people hate listen than like listen. So maybe you could give us $1 out of spite, and you could come on and just trash talk us and tell us how terrible the show is. And maybe it'll be our highest numbers episode ever. And wouldn't that be fun? Where you just trash talk us, you don't let us get a word in, we don't even get to do the show. We have a great topic, and you just trash talk us and insult us the entire time. And we can't say anything because you paid us. So how's that? It's almost like the government, where they buy and sell you and you can't say anything. But you didn't hear that from me. That's just speculation that has been said by other people. Not me. Anyway, you can support us on Patreon. You can find us on YouTube and do all the things, like, subscribe, comment. That will bump the algorithm up, and more people will find us, and that's always great. Or you could just share us with your neighbor or friend or enemy or frenemy or coworkers that you do or don't like. Up to you. At wherever you get your podcast. I was going to say wherever your podcasts are sold, but I mean, they're not necessarily sold.
No, this is free.
This is free, just with ads, because we need to get paid somehow.
Yeah.
Anyway, I've said that all I need to say. But here's the news, and that's the news, and here's the weather. You are now about to witness the strength of street knowledge from a ragtag group of rogues. So let's get on with the goddamn show. All right, you talk. I'm gonna finish this bottle. Glass of wine. I was gonna finish the bottle, but there's more wine than I thought that there. No, there's more wine than I thought that there was in there. So I'll just save that for tomorrow or Saturday.
Nice.
And I'm gonna go get a lot of water.
All right. So anyway, Rocko's Modern Life is, of course, it's an animated cartoon series. It was created by the creator of SpongeBob, Stephen Hill.
No, it was not created by the creator of SpongeBob.
Oh, he was the creative director. Sorry.
Yes, he was the creative director, and he worked on most of season 4.
Yes,
because the creator Joe Murray stepped away for season 4.
Yeah,
he still supervised. He still supervised and like had a lot of input on season 4.
Yeah.
But Steven Hillenburg really took the reins on that show.
Yeah.
For season 4.
And so it was obviously, it was a Nicktoon. It was on Nickelodeon. And it's for kids, but it also featured a lot of adult humor, which like you would never ever like get back then when you were a kid. But like watching it now, it's like, wow, I can't believe they got this on a children's network. Some of the jokes, even
that they got, it wasn't that they targeted the jokes for like both kids and adults and a college audience, that they really tried to shake things up.
Yeah.
It's that they geared it so heavily in that way, and that they were even able to get that far. But I mean, this was a time, like we said, Rocko's Modern Life is the 4th Nicktoon ever.
Yeah.
So this was a time, and if you watch the documentary The Orange Years, I think it's still on Hulu. Like you'll see just how scrappy that Nickelodeon really was in its infancy, where they just wanted to shake every single thing up and they wanted to throw everything at the wall, and whether it stuck or not, they didn't care. They just wanted to
Yeah.
throw stuff and break things, and
Well,
they certainly did with this.
yeah, and it's interesting because I always thought like Ren and Stimpy was definitely raunchier than Rocko's Modern Life, and
Well,
if I recall like when I was a kid that like my mom didn't like when I watched Ren and Stimpy, but she was okay with Rocko's Modern Life. So, but like
I was
looking
gonna
back,
say the difference maker is that Ren and Stimpy was Ren and Stimpy was totally in your face, and we'll do a Ren and Stimpy episode at some point, I'm
Yeah.
sure. But Ren and Stimpy was totally in your face and did not care and was
Yeah.
like, "This is what this is," and it was, and like Ren and Stimpy did it in front of you.
Yeah.
Where Rocko's Modern Life, everything raunchy and all of the adult jokes and all of the innuendos, that was all like window dressing and in the background. So like a kid, it was designed in a way where a kid wouldn't get it at all and an
Yeah.
adult would. So both people would laugh for different, so both sets of audiences would laugh for different reasons.
There were a couple of instances in Rocko though where it was in your face. Like
Yes.
there was one where Rocko is a phone sex operator, and like
Yeah.
that it's
Well,
like
that's the first
very
episode.
obvious. Yeah, yeah. So it's very obvious that he is like a phone sex operator. Plus you had really, really big man who had the nipples of truth, and his nipples would
Yes.
literally attach to someone's eyeballs.
And he
It
could
was-
see the future with his nipples of truth
yeah.
and his nipples of his nipples of the future and all of these other things.
Yeah. So I mean there was a couple of things that were like very like in your face. But yeah, you're right. For the most part, most of it was just implied and it was like in the background. So as a kid, you didn't see it. Or you just didn't understand what the joke was, so like it went over your head.
Right. Like a lot of times like I wouldn't get, like as a kid I wouldn't notice any of the jokes, but then as I got a little bit older, like even into like my teenage years and then college or whatever, just revisiting episodes,
Yeah.
just saying, "Oh crap."
Yeah. Yeah.
Or just how did they get this past the censors? Like how did this air at all?
Yeah.
Like a lot of times, but it it exactly did. It a lot of the and this launched the careers of Tom Kenny, who was of course the voice of SpongeBob,
Mhm.
and Carlos Lazaraki, which he, well, I mean he voices so many people. He's known for what the heck is his name? The boss in Family Guy. He's known for him. He's also
Yep.
like he's also on camera in Reno 911, and
Mhm.
I mean, and of course he's Rocko,
Yeah.
which is probably his most iconic character, and he does.
He was also the original voice of Spyro, which I think we mentioned on our
Yes,
Spyro
we
episode.
did. Which Tom Kenny ended up becoming the second voice of
Yeah, so it's
Spyro.
like
So
came full
every
circle there.
yeah, a lot of weird things kind of ended up happening, and we've also got Mr. Lawrence, who was who also had like popped up as well
Mhm.
over there, and we also have
It's like 6 degrees of Rocko's Modern Life.
yeah, well, also you have there's a lot of instances where Charlie Adler shows up on that show too, which Charlie
Yeah.
Adler's he sits behind the director camp a lot more often now, but you couldn't get away from Charlie Adler in like the 90s and early 2000s. He
Mhm.
was everywhere. Anytime you heard a high pitched anything, like that was usually him.
Mhm.
So like these people were all you and like you they went on to do just about everything else in your childhood too. You know, everybody they became about as iconic as Rob Paulson in their own way, and
Yeah.
and Kevin Conroy and Keith David. But it, like they like it started here, and then there's all these other shows where you'll see them, and it's just like holy crap, they all did that, and it all starts from Rocko's Modern Life.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's interesting because Joe Murray didn't want to do cartoons. He didn't want to do he didn't want to do this at all. Like they
Mhm.
basically like gave this to him knowing that he didn't want to do it, and he was like, I really don't. And they were like, well, just do whatever you want. And he was like, okay. And that's kind of what it was. But but like because he had started he had tried to do illustrating jobs, and like he tried to do animation and everything, and to get everything in there, he tried to get his own show and all, and like comic books and all these other things. He tried during the 80s, and it just didn't really work out for whatever reason. Like things got scrapped, things didn't last very long, or like things got canceled or whatever it was. It just didn't
Mhm.
work, or like his independent projects didn't really like work out. And he was just so jaded and frustrated that he was like, that's why he was like, I don't want to even do this.
Yeah.
And then they decided, and like he just wanted to fund an independent film called My Dog Zero.
Mhm.
And he just sent this to them, which was basically the idea from Rocko's Modern Life was basically like it was basically a comic that failed and didn't really get taken, and like didn't take off. Forget what the original character was called. I think that it was. I have it here, but I was hoping to. Travis, there you go. It was called Travis, and he tried to sell the comic book. It didn't work, and he was just like, I don't know what to do with this. So he just like, and they said, hey, just do the show. And he was like, all right, I'm just going to put this on there. And they said okay, because he was just like, listen, I just need the money to fund this like independent project. I don't care about a cartoon or anything. I just want to do the independent project. I just want to do My Dog Zero. And then Nickelodeon, he was like, they figured that they would pre-buy it, so he pitched it to them. He pitched it to them, assuming that it would just fail, and they would like maybe they would just like pre-buy it and just do something so that he could get funding, and then go on his merry way.
Mhm.
And because the industry was coming out of a rough period where like animation was just like it was at like it was at the end of the business cycle for like the 80s boom, which was really just it was a lot of fancy Disney movies and like big animation booms because of the toy lines. Like at this point
Yeah.
in time, a lot of cartoons, which I'm sure we've mentioned on another podcast episode, I can't think of it right now. Probably the on the SWAT Cats episode we
Yeah, the
mentioned
SWAT
this,
Cats episode.
that most cartoons from the 80s and 70s and 60s, they were all designed to sell a toy. So the cartoon was an afterthought, and nobody cared if the cartoon was any good. They were just like, is it good enough to sell the toy? Like they just came to you with the toy first, and the toy company came to like the animation company and just said, hey, we have a toy idea for this thing. Can you make a cartoon around it to sell it? And
Wasn't necessarily
they
that bad ones, okay ones that were
hmm?
some okay toys
No,
like the
we had a few gems in there,
yeah,
like Ninja Turtles and
yeah,
everything, but like, but a lot of, and like strawberry shortcakes and what have you. We got a lot of we had a lot of gems in there, but the 90s was coming out of the early 90s was coming out of that fatigue where people
yeah,
were just like, we don't want to keep buying toys for our kids,
yeah,
like, and the cartoons just weren't really that good anymore.
yeah,
So they were just, because it was just such a crank, because they thought that the money would never end, which
yeah.
tends to happen at the end of any business cycle. Is the businesses get lazy, there's no innovation, and everything gets stagnates because there's too much of a good thing,
Mhm.
and there's the bust period. Which, if you're into finance or economics, we're trying not to talk about that stuff on here, but if you're in that, we're getting to that part, and you should be careful. Everybody's saying it, but everybody's saying it with the whim that things are just not going to happen right now. So they're just like, oh, well, it'll happen, but like, tomorrow. But like, we're going to make all the money today, and like, not realizing that tomorrow's here. But anyway, we're not getting into finance or like anything like that. This isn't the show for that. This isn't the time for that. I also don't have as much time as I did for the Magic 30 thing a few like 2 episodes ago. where we roasted the Wizards of the Coast and Hasbro. That was fun, wasn't it?
Yeah.
For me.
Yeah.
Anyway, so they were coming out of that period of time, and like Nickelodeon was a scrappy young company. They were like, listen, just go do what you want. And he was like, I don't want to do a cartoon. And they were like, do the cartoon. And he was like, but I don't want to. They were like, well, just do it. So, and he was like, fine, then I'll do whatever I want. And they were like, yeah, please do whatever you want. And he was like, what? Yeah, okay, it's cool. So they did the show, and it was a very loose thing. And they wanted to make it like good for everyone. They wanted to make it hit every single like audience, both children, adults, college students, and they absolutely achieved that. Now the interesting thing was a toy company planned on making and selling Rocko's Modern Life toys,
How?
and I don't know. They wanted to make toys of this thing for some reason.
It's really not like a toy cartoon. It's
It's
very strange.
not. No, it's really not. But I mean,
Well,
again, we were coming out of the cycle where toy companies were just like, "Hey, just make a show and we'll make a toy for it. We don't
yeah.
care what it is or what it's about." And so the toy company was gonna make Rocco's toys basically, and they had an issue with the color because the original color of Rocco or Travis, whatever you want to call him, was yellow, and the toy company was like, "Hey, we already have a yellow toy." Or we already have like a main yellow toy, so like, can you change the color? So he changed it to the beige color that he is,
Mm-hmm.
and that's why Rocco is just brownish or beigeish or whatever you want to call the color.
It's like beige or
Yeah.
tan, like a light
Or
tan.
tan, yeah, something like that. But that's why he's that color, because the toy company told him to change it, and the toy company never ended up making the toy anyway.
Oh
So
my
it was
god,
like a stupid thing.
that is a
But
stupid thing.
yeah, but it doesn't matter. I don't. I think it helped the character because he looks more like a real wallaby anyway.
Yeah, that's true.
So I think it's fine. But anyway, the meat of the matter. This show is crazy.
That is a crazy ass show.
Like, long story short, I mean, I guess you could sum it up because I've been talking a lot.
Well, I mean, so it's based off of Rocko, of course, who is a wallaby. He's a Australian immigrant living in the fictional town of O-Town, which is in the United States. And his best friend is a cow,
Or a steer.
is a steer named Heifer, who was raised by wolves, so his name is Heifer Wolf. And his other friend is Phil. I think you mentioned Filbert, who is a turtle.
Yes.
And Filbert is very like nerdy and neurotic and almost like kind of like I don't want to say he's like a Woody Allen-esque character, because he's not. He's like more like nerdier than that, and like very like fragile. Like he like is nauseous all the time and stuff, and like
He is. And kind of a perv if you look into some of the if you look into things a little bit on his character.
Yeah.
He does get engaged at the end of the show, which is nice, to Dr. Hutchins, who is a one-handed cat doctor. Or is she a cat?
Yes, she's a cat.
Yeah, she's a cat doctor who has a hook hand.
Because there's a whole
she's a dentist, I think.
She is a dentist, and there's like a whole thing where like her family hates like his family and vice versa, because like it's supposed to be like cats for some reason naturally hate turtles, or turtles hate cats, or something. It's like some weird thing. For some reason,
it's her mother. It's her mother, and it like and there's a lot of underlying things in the episode in the show which we're going to get into that like adults would pick up on but children would not, and it's not even just sexual innuendo or anything like that. There's a ton of that.
Yeah,
but there's like deeper story arcs too in there. The I guess the lore of Rocko's Modern Life, if you want to call it that.
Yeah. So at very like at surface level, this is just like a very like happy-go-lucky kind of silly non sequitur surrealist kind of humor sometimes show.
Right.
But
like I mean, for a kid, I always thought that it was just a crazy show where random crap happened, because on the screen, like everything's exploding.
Yes.
Just things are just like random things are happening. There's constant chaos in the show. And like Rocco's always he's like the straight man of the show. He's like he's just trying to like keep everything okay and like just keep it going, where like everyone else is crazy but he's the
Yeah.
only normal one, where everything around him is complete chaos, where we're like and like just as a kid you're visually just seeing all these wacky things happening on screen, but you're not paying attention to all the little things going on in the background that are static that like the adults would pick up on. So it's very clever how they disguise the adult jokes.
Yes. Yeah, and but it's also like there's a lot of like deeper storylines too that are like kind of uh, uh like the not necessarily like funny. It's kind of like actually saying like a, something like profound, commenting on society at large, and like again, this is like this type of stuff that like goes over your head when you're a kid, but like growing up you're like, oh crap, this is like, it's almost like a Seinfeld. I feel like Rocko's Modern Life is almost like the Seinfeld for kids, because like it's like
In a way,
it's almost like it's a
Filbert,
show about nothing.
Filbert is clearly the Costanza character.
Yes. Yeah, so Filbert is definitely Costanza. Rocko being the straight man would probably be Jerry. I guess Heifer would probably be Kramer, and there's not really an Elaine character, I guess.
It's kind of Dr. Hutchins, but like she's
Yeah.
not really. She's kind of the Elaine by default.
Yeah, she's
but
more of
she's
like a
not.
recurring character. She's not really a main,
Yeah, she's not exactly a main. I mean, you have that, and you have. I mean, the wacky neighbors, the big heads, are more are
Yeah.
like more prominently featured than anybody else of recurring characters, and
Yeah.
that's a whole nother ball of wax that we'll get into in a moment.
Yeah. But so it's like this cast of wacky characters, and they get in like all kinds of. It's funny because it's most of the stuff that they like get involved with is just like everyday situations. Like there's nothing that like is too crazy that happens in the town. It's literally just like their everyday life, pretty much. And there's like an episode where like Rocko gets his bathroom renovated, and then like is too vague when he talks to like the contractor or whatever. Like he wins like a free bathroom in a game show. I don't know, remember the circumstances, but then the contractor comes and turns every room of his house into a bathroom. Like, and it's like, oh, my ballroom's a bathroom.
Yeah, it's really just weird things happen around Rocko, and he kind of just accepts it.
Yeah. Yeah, he's very like just goes with the flow, and a lot of the stuff when it's like crazy shit is happening, he'll be like his catchphrase is like X day, and X being like a variable is a very dangerous day. So there's like laundry day is a very dangerous day.
I use that phrase to every laundry day, which is at least once a week. I use it. I say it to every single person that I run into.
Yeah.
That sees me doing laundry or is in the laundry room with me, just to see who gets it, and nobody gets it.
Yeah.
I say it. I say it. I say it to colleagues at work. I say it to people on the street. I say it to as many people as I can, and for some reason, only one time has anyone ever understood the reference, and it's been somebody that I sent an email to like 10 years ago for to arrange an interview with, I think, the singer from Combi Christ, which is an industrial metal band.
Yeah.
They have a nice tour bus, actually. Somebody they have a Nintendo 64 on that tour bus. The guy Andy is very youthful. Everybody else just seemed like they hated him. But I don't know if that's true, but I don't know. Maybe Andy got all the ladies. I'm not sure. He was like Swedish, so very high cheekbones and blonde hair and tall. Good for the ladies, I guess. And everyone else just looked very shaggy, so it's possible. But they had a very nice tour bus. One of the nicer tour buses I've ever been on. Not that I've been on many. I did not get to play Nintendo 64 on the tour bus. I was upset.
Damn.
But he seemed, he was in good spirits, and everybody else kind of kept to themselves. Nice enough guy, but I think the best time that I ever had was probably with Havoc because,
Oh,
well, that day I interviewed 3 different bands and we all just did the interviews at the same bar.
oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, so it was cool, except for Havoc because then we did that in their van and it was fun. But
Nice,
yeah, it
nice.
was a good time. It was a good time. I had a lot of fun at the Knitting Factory. May it rest in peace.
Yeah.
But anyway, um, so what I was getting at was just laundry day is a very dangerous day, and I like it's a phrase that I use constantly, and
Yep.
it cracks me up. And like that day, it's just like he said, like in that particular episode, he says that, and like no one understands why he says that until he actually gets to the laundromat, and the laundry machine is trying to kill him.
Yeah. And it's always stuff like crazy stuff like that that happens. Like he's doing something so mundane and like so like okay, like how could he possibly get hurt or die on this or something crazy could happen, and then something crazy happens. Like it just like
Yeah,
goes out of control. um,
yeah, like
and I'm surprised more people don't know that phrase. Like like blank day is a very dangerous day because for me, I always thought Rocko was like one of the more popular shows from Nickelodeon, but I
I
guess
feel
it's
like it was, but I guess people may not remember it, or maybe the
maybe.
people that I speak to never saw it.
I mean, it was and remains to be my favorite Nicktoon. Um,
Yeah, I
I
would have to agree with that. That's
when I was
definitely mine too.
yeah, I had like such good memories of Rocko's Modern
I feel
Life, like
like a
watching
lot
it
of
growing up.
people their favorite falls between their favorite like when I ask people who like or whenever I'm in like whenever I talk about Nicktoons with people, their favorite they either say Rocko's Modern Life, Hey Arnold, Rugrats, or Invader Zim.
Yeah,
I
Invader
almost
Zim is a
never
big
hear
one.
anything else.
Invader Zim is a big one. I think Invader Zim is if you go by like the cliques in high school, like all the goth kids liked Invader Zim. That
Yes,
was
all
their
the goth
favorite.
kids did like Invader Zim.
Uh, uh, I have heard a couple times Angry Beavers, but that's like
Uh
Nickelodeon hipsters, you know. Like
Angry Beavers was okay. I never really got into it.
I know a couple people
And
that is their favorite.
I never really cared for Cat Dog. I always kind of just had it on just like
I
but
liked
I
Cat
never
Dog.
it,
I thought it was all right.
it was fine, but it wasn't like anything special to me
It had
anyway.
its moments. It had its moments.
Yes, I will say it had its moments.
Um,
And Jim Cummings was great on that show as always.
yeah, of course, yeah.
And I think and I think
Tom Kenny was also on it. He was, I
yes,
think,
he
the
was
mouse.
Dog, I think, right?
No, yeah, he
Or
might have
was
been
he
Dog, but I think he was
Winslow?
also the mouse. The
He
like
was Winslow.
Winslow. I'm
That
pretty
I
sure.
didn't know. I mean, we could look it up, but anyway, it does.
Well, we're talking about Rocko, so we can talk about
Yeah, we're
Cat
talking
Dog on a
about
whole nother
Rocco, so we
episode.
should talk about Rocco.
Yeah.
That would make sense. But yeah, the show. Well, it's very strange for Joe Murray to get back to him. Um, that the show came about because he. Well, I mean, it didn't come about because of this, but like he's he's always in interviews when he talks about it, he's always a little bit like conflicted as to whether or not as to like even though like it was a great thing, but it came out of like something terrible, and
Hmm.
it was 2 months into the production of the first season of the show. His first wife committed suicide, and he's based that suicide on the show being picked up, and he said I've always it was always an awful connection because I look at Rocco as such a positive in my life. And he thinks that he just had a lot of unresolved emotional and physical issues when he moved to LA and everything. And
Hmm.
like, he's, he feels like it was a marathon with his pants around his ankles. And it's like, he thought that he was going to do one season, move back to San Francisco, and then just, finish whatever he had, well, like, finish whatever business he had left to do, and then they approved other seasons and he was and like so he's like it's a torn thing because it's like it's a great thing but it came from such tragedy and
Hmm.
my heart's out to him for that one. I'm sure it's something that stays with you forever. But anyway, I think it's interesting that happened. But like the show itself, very strange things happens constantly to Rocko while he's just doing like very like normal ordinary chores as you said, like even just trying to find a job in the first episode, canned was well the first real episode, the pilot episode was Trash O Madness, and there's a lot of O things in there, like there's O Town, the company Conglamo, which owns O Town, and that's why that's the basic lore. As like he thought, like Joe Murray thought that it was just funny just to put O in the middle of things because it just like he felt that it just made whatever it was comical.
Yeah.
And just also like at the same time basically just said that like was whatever the fixation's way of the situation was, just saying like whatever preceded the O was just, this is what it is. This is everything. And then the O, everything else is nothing. Like it's meaningless because there's so much more power in whatever the preface is. So, like, which is why you see Conglamo and their phrase is like their slogan is "We own you," and then there's O Town, and everything in the O Town has O in the middle of it, so it's all owned by Conglamo. Yeah. So Conglamo owns the town. So it's like it's self-contained in its own reference, and I think that's really great how they like put that in there.
Yeah,
it was like very, at first, it seems like a silly little thing that you just notice throughout, but then when you piece it together, it's like, oh crap, like this is the big bad corporation that owns the world.
Yeah, it was very much like way ahead of its time in that, and that the predicting that corporations would eventually just own us.
Exactly, and like everybody works, and everybody works for. Yeah, of course it did.
They saw it
slowly
in the 90s.
But surely it came.
Yep.
Because I mean, we've said this before, probably a long time ago, but at some point, like, with mergers and acquisitions, there's only going to be a handful of companies that can merge and and there's only going to be a handful of companies that can merge and acquire anything because they're just going to be too big. And well, sadly, not to get into politics, but sadly, the law and politics do not move as quickly as everything else. So by the time antitrust lawsuits and everything else gets dragged out, it's just too late. And by the time anything is resolved, again, enough damage has been done where it doesn't matter and the corporation has won. But again, a story for another day on another podcast.
Yeah.
And not our podcast, somebody else's. We'll continue to talk about pop culture for the sake of your amusement, whoever you are in digital media device land.
For the sake of our sanity.
Yes, that too. But yeah, there's a bunch of crazy stuff that happens in this show, and like there's a lot of things that you don't notice as a kid, and self-contained in the lore is basically, well, Heifer's adopted. We get that in an episode when we realize that he's raised by wolves, but we see it in flashbacks because there's an episode, I think it's called Who's Coming to Dinner, where Heifer like takes a girl out on a date, right? He takes her out on a date and she gets to meet her parents or something like that. And she also was raised by wolves. So, and he finds out that the wolves were planning on fattening her up and eating her. And he's trying to convince her, and he like realizes it and he tells her, hey, they're trying to eat you. And she doesn't believe him, so she breaks up with him. And we never see her again, so it's only to be assumed that she gets eaten by her family who adopted her. But it turns out that that's exactly the same plan that Heifer's family had, and they eventually, like, he grew on them, and they never had the heart to tell him. So he grows up as a carnivorous steer. It's unclear whether or not they eat other steer. I don't recall them ever eating a steer, but they eat a moose And
I think he really only eats chicken. Like he eats a choky chicken a lot.
yes, well, choky chicken is one of those innuendos that you and
Of
I
course.
never understood as a child, and then of course as we became teenagers, we were like, "Oh crap!" Because
And eventually
choking.
it was eventually changed to chewy chicken for that very reason.
Yes,
though.
I think for the last season they changed it to chewy chicken, and then in the Static Cling Netflix special, which was brilliant, it is renamed. It is back to choky chicken.
Mm-hmm.
But like, I mean, most of the sexual innuendos are just penis jokes in the show.
Yeah.
So, or like metaphors for like spanking you, or for like jacking off or spanking it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I want to say that there's various points in the show where a monkey gets spanked,
Yeah.
and there's probably other things that go on that we don't remember. But there's like, but they eat a moose for sure at one point, and I think it's the episode when Heifer when like Rocko goes to Heifer's house and realizes that Heifer was adopted because he sees his family and they're all wolves, and he's like, "Oh, I didn't." He never told me he was adopted, and Heifer's family gets like a look where they're like, he doesn't know that he's adopted, even though it's very obvious that because Heifer's a cow and the wolves are wolves. It's like, you tell me how a wolf managed to have a cow, but then again, there was cow and chicken where
That's true.
Mama had a chicken, Mama had a cow. Dad was proud. He didn't care how. So, which that in itself is a whole nother ball of wax that we won't get into.
Was cursed. It was
a cursed cartoon. We will talk about. We will probably talk about that on another one because that show deserves an episode of how bizarre it was.
It was bizarre, and I would say it was raunchier again than Rocko's.
I would say it was Rocko's Modern Life turned up to 11.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
But yeah, so anyway, in that episode, you then find out that like in flashbacks, and Heifer wants to meet his dad, so he goes to like a gravestone of a cow, and he like assumes it's his dad, and then he gets like a weird cloud flashback where his dad is like, "No, I'm not," where his dad's like just a jackass, and he's just like, "No, I'm not not to mean that he's a donkey, but he's just a degenerate."
Yeah.
And he's just like, "I hate my kids. I don't want to meet these kids. This is my lady Ro," or whatever her name is, and he's like, "Are you mom?" And she's like, and then he's like, "No, your mom's a car seat in like Chicago or something like that," implying that his mom was murdered and her hide was used as a cow seat. And then he's just like mean to his new wife, and he's like, "Why don't you go make me a sandwich or something?" And like, and when like Rocko sees that, and like at some point Heifer pulls back like a flap of his skin, and he thinks that he has a birthmark where it's like a butcher's map of like the different sections of a cow to cut up.
Yeah.
And he he never puts two and two together that his family was planning on eating on him. But while they're eating the moose, the dad like gives the awkward stare while he has the moose heart still beating before he like bites it and cuts the cord. So it's implied they just eat live animals for dinner.
Well, they're wolves.
They're wolves. So of course you would expect that, but that's just messy. And why would you want that? Wouldn't this be a great time to have a plug for like Blue Apron or something? Yeah. But then again, we don't have any sponsors. If you own a company willing to take a risk, well, give us a call. Reach out to us at whydoesthisexistshow@gmail.com. Yes, we're shameless whores giving a promotion. And wouldn't you want to do that?
Thinking about it, Rocko's Modern Life is like one of the few shows where like everybody's an anthropomorphic animal, and they actually show that they eat other animals. So it's like
they do.
They're probably eating another person. Like that was like an anthropomorphic moose probably before they started eating it.
That's probable.
And so it's basically like they're eating another person in their world.
Oh, I never thought of that. So it's basically like cannibalism is fine.
Right, but it's not really cannibalism because it's a different like species, but it's like you're still eating a person.
It's still a societal cannibalism.
Yeah.
Like it's like a tribal cannibalism. It's almost like if it's like if native tribes would eat the hearts of their enemies, basically, to like it's kind of like something like that. But we've got but also what I wanted to get into was like, well, there is a banned episode which is pretty crazy. I mean, there's a couple that like there were banned jokes and banned episodes where like that were like that just they got past the censors the first time and then it only aired a couple like one or two other times and then it like was just too much.
Yeah.
Like I guess they caught him. We're like, holy crap! How did we let this go? There's one episode, and I forget what it's called, but there's an episode that's totally banned where Mrs. Bighead, who the Big Heads next door, is well, they're a couple and they're frogs. They're horny toads. Yeah, of course they're horny toads. And there's lots of horny things. Like in one of the episodes, he's like Rocko's giving in the first episode, he's giving a tattoo to he tries to get a bunch of jobs. He's like giving a tattoo to a rhino on the inside of his on the roof of his mouth with a jackhammer because of course he is. And the rhino, of course, his name is Mr. Horny. And there's the Big Heads, and they also have a son named Ralph, which we'll get into. Ralph becomes an animator, and then there's the Static Cling, which we'll get into in a little bit during the queer stories portion of the show. Yeah, that's a whole segment. There's a lot to cover here, but they're just an old married couple. He goes to work, she stays home, and he makes the money. He's like an accountant or something for Conglommo. He's got like a good position there.
Well, he's like multiple things at Conglommo. It's like explained that like his job basically changes like based on like what it's needed to be in the episode.
Yeah. And anyway, he's out working all the time and whatever, and like he doesn't have enough time for his wife, and there's like this whole banned episode. She brings she like invites Rocko over specifically to seduce him, and he's like, he like rips her clothes. She like instructs her clothes off, and she rips his shirt off, and she's doing all of these things to seduce him, and he thinks that he's just like cleaning up the house and like running air and like doing chores for her, where like she's just trying to like get him in bed, and then she pays him at the end of the day when Mr. Bighead comes home and he has his shirt off and everything, and he's like, no, you don't, it's not what it looks like. And it's like that was too much after it had aired like once or twice, but you can still get it on DVDs. Yeah. There's another scene there's another scene from a different episode where they go to a motel, and it's clearly a no-tell motel, and it's trying to be a parody of Psycho, but it's very obvious that it's like a sex motel with hookers and everything, and they're charging hourly, and they just go to stay for the night because it's like rainy or their car breaks down or something like that. And they go to the clerk, and the clerk is like, how many hours do you want? And they're like, oh no, we want to stay the whole night. And like you hear like banging and everything, and he's like, yeah, just come back in 20 minutes. And yeah, and like there's a whole thing, and then like and then they're like, oh no, we want to stay the whole night. And he's like, whoa, okay. And he like just like he's surprised that they actually want to spend a night there. And then like they're like in bed later on, and you just hear like more banging and stuff, and then Heifer just goes, oh, Gladys. And it's like, well, what is Heifer into? Or is it just like one of the nearby hoes that are like doing whatever they're doing? I don't know. It's implied that something else is going on between the two of them. Some people speculate that the reason that it was pulled, it was not because of the innuendo, but because the clerk is a racial Asian stereotype. Even though he's a zebra, you can tell from his physical appearance and also the way that he speaks that it's clearly in like a Chinese man.
Yeah.
So that's I wouldn't be surprised if that's more likely the reason why it was pulled, and like the censors didn't notice that it was very sexual, implications going around.
Yeah.
But you could find like low quality clips of that, and it's pretty damn funny. But there's a whole lot of things that we missed, like the phone sex thing where he's just saying "oh baby" a bunch of times, and it also says "be hot," and like there's like a slogan that in the back that just says "be hot, be naughty, be courteous," which I think should be a mantra for everyday life. But that's me. I think everyone should live and die by that creed. Be hot,
Yeah.
be naughty, be courteous.
Yeah.
Like
There was
I think people should get that tattooed on themselves. Not me, but and I am not a tattoo advisor. If you want to do that, that is of your own accord, and I am not legally responsible for any of that. But just like that one time that I told somebody that it was a good idea that they get a Hakuna Matata tattoo.
Oh no.
Well, they did, and the tattoo artist spelled it wrong. But that's
Oh,
not my fault. It was their
botch,
idea. It was their idea. I was in college. I don't know who this person is. They ran into me at the end of a night where both of us were clearly drinking. I am not in the wrong.
Oh.
I'm not in the wrong.
That person's dumb for taking advice from someone that they just met that's drunk.
We were both young at the time and very innocent. Well, one of us was. I won't say who. But good mantra to live by. There's also plenty of other things that happen in every episode, and we just simply do not have enough time to get all of it. But the queer stories, that's where the lifeblood of this is, and there's a whole lot of interesting queer stories that come out of this show. One of them is the clown episode, actually, which is it's clearly about being gay or bisexual or cross-dressing or a drag queen. It's one of those things.
Mm-hmm.
More likely being gay or bisexual. The name of the episode is called Clown in the Closet or Closet Clown, something like that, which couldn't be more obvious. And there's it's like nighttime and a car breaks down outside the Big Head's house, and it's a clown car, and clowns come out of it, and clowns are trying to fix the tire. And Mr. Big Head gets very livid for no reason whatsoever, and he starts screaming at the clowns, and he's like, "We don't want your kind around here. We don't like you. Get out of here. Mm-hmm. Enough with the car. Like, just go away." And his wife, of course, is Mrs. Big Head, is just like, "What's the problem? Like, leave them alone. Who cares? It's not what's the big deal? Their car broke down." So he chases them out of town, and like a red nose falls, and he picks up the red nose and he puts it in his pocket, or it falls into his pocket somehow, and he forgets about it, and or so we think, and then he goes to work, and he goes to the bathroom, and he puts the red nose on when he thinks he's in private, and he's in the stall and whatever, and he's like, I'm a clown, woo, I'm a clown, and he's enjoying it.
Yeah.
And he steps out of the bathroom stall or whatever, and he turns around, and his boss gets out of the stall next to him, and his boss he's like starts panicking because he's like, oh my god, I've been found out.
Yeah.
And the boss is like, let me see you when you're in my office for a minute. And he comes and he goes to his boss's office, and he just thinks the worst, like, I'm going to get fired or whatever it is. And his boss is like, I had a funny feeling about you. And it turns out that his boss is a clown too. And his boss is like in full clown regalia. And he's like, so when did you know? Or something like that. And he's like, how long have you been clowning? And he's like, I don't know what you're talking about. And he's like, oh, please. And he's like, you mean you haven't gone public with this yet? And it's like, well, what else could it possibly be?
Mm-hmm.
And then the next thing, and the boss's demeanor is totally different. The boss's demeanor isn't like, he's very like straight-laced and stern when he's talking to him as the boss. But then when he's in private in the boss's office, the boss is very flamboyant, and the boss starts calling another clown friend, and he's like, and he's like, "Oh, we gotta set you up." So the boss starts calling his clown friends, and you know, like Mr. Bighead is like, "Holy crap! There's a whole clown community I didn't even know about." And I like being a clown, and I've kept this hidden the entire time. And he sets him up at birthday parties, and he's a hit until eventually the birthday party or whatever event that he's doing, his wife and everyone in town is there, and he's like, "Oh God," and everyone accepts him and nobody cares, which it's pretty obvious what it's about. And then, of course, Rocko is just like, "Well, that's what secrets are for. Like, without secrets, like we wouldn't like secrets are what make us special." And everyone starts coming out with their own weird things, which Filbert, as we've said before, is a perv. Mentions that he's wearing European undergarments, which could only be a thong or something very like, feminine or silky or something of that nature. And then, of course, Rocko says, "Oh, well, I've always loved rainbows." And, of course, that's too much for the town, and they chase him out.
Yeah.
But it's like it's pretty obvious that that's what that episode is about. It's like it's just more about just being gay and bisexual and or whatever, and nobody cares, and just like be yourself, and everyone who was really important will accept you, and who cares what other people think.
Yeah.
And I thought that, and I loved how they did that. And there's many other, there's quite a few other stories of that. Like in the I think it's the last episode where we have the episode where Filbert proposes to where he wants to propose to Dr. Hutchins.
Mm-hmm.
And Dr. Hutchins' mother is bigoted, and she's older than everyone else, obviously, and she harkens back to a time where you just stayed in your lane and you married whatever you were, and you kept it within the same heritage or the same culture, and you didn't go outside of that, and that was that. And that's and she's like, "I know better. Turtles and cats should never be together. I don't like turtles, and I don't like anything else." And also, Heifer's grandfather is part of that too, because he hates Rocko, and we find out that he just hates wallabies for like no particular reason, but he just hates wallabies. So like there's the racial stigma, which would clearly get over a child's head. And Dr. Hutchins' mom is the same way, and she doesn't agree with the marriage, and she hates the turtles. And like in the episode, Dr. Hutchins is meeting up with her friend, and her friend is like a big buff tiger, and I forgot what the tiger's name is. I want to say it's Tyler the tiger or something like that. But she's like, but Filbert, like, he's crushed because he thinks, "Oh man, she's got a cool new boyfriend." Mm-hmm. And it's an old high school friend. She probably rekindled an old relationship, and like, how could I compete with that guy? He's jacked, he's in great shape, he's good looking, and he's a tiger, and the mom accepts everything. What chance do I have? I'm a turtle. And I already know that her mother hates me, so like, why would this even work out? But his friends convince him to go through with it, and he does, and Dr. Hutchins accepts, and and they get engaged, and it's a great way to end the show. And he's like, "But what about Tyler? Like, what about your friend Tyler? Like, what about the tiger guy?" And she like cracks up, and she's like, "Tyler?" She's like, "Oh, that would never happen." And she starts laughing, and then Tyler starts laughing, or the tiger guy, whatever his name is, they start cracking up, and it's implied that it would be because Tyler is probably gay and would have no interest in her. So, but they don't outright say it, but it's implied. So, another way to get around that is just to simply not exactly say it, but imply it. Yeah. And that's great too, because nobody cares. At the end of it, nobody cares. And the best example of that is the Static Cling episode, which is a special that came out specifically for Netflix in 2019. Yep. And it was a 2-part thing. The first part was the first part was Static Cling, the Rocko's Modern Life thing. And the second part was an Invader Zim special. I can't remember the name of it. I personally did not really. I thought that the Invader Zim one was just okay. It was nice to
Mhm.
see it. It was just okay. But the Rocko's Modern Life one was spectacular, and it really went out of his way, and it was so great. Like we said earlier, the Big Heads have a son named Ralph. Ralph goes on to be an animator in another episode, and he creates the show that is the greatest animated show in the in the cartoon. It's the number one show that, of course, is owned by Congloma because why wouldn't
Yeah.
it be? And it's called the Fatheads, which is an obvious it's obviously an animated play on his parents, the Big
Yeah.
Heads,
Yeah.
and they're clearly the same frogs and everything, and it's basically like the Simpsons episode when Bart does the Angry Dad comic and it goes viral. It's just simply that, and he creates the cartoon. He becomes a successful animator, and then in the Static Cling episode, um, Rocko and friends return to the world 20 years later, only to realize that things have changed, and the whole Static Cling is about accepting change, and that yes, times will change over however long. Times will always change, and you need to just grow with them and accept them, and don't worry, and things will be fine, and you don't have to. And yes, you can pine for the good old days, and you can be nostalgic about things, but like nostalgia doesn't always necessarily mean that it was always just simply better way back when. Sometimes it was, but sometimes it wasn't, depending on what you're looking at and how you feel about it. Because I don't know how whoever it is that's listening to the end of this in digital media device lands feels about certain things. Maybe some people tuned out. I have no idea. Or maybe some people called their friends and they listened to this. Wouldn't that be nice? Um, I don't know. But Static Cling is all about accepting change and just going with the times. And there's a lot more satire that's going on in there that's just great little jabs at the culture, the consumer culture, and just how accelerated it is, and just how big corporations have taken over everything. They go into the store and they buy what's the equivalent of the iPhone, and Heifer's I bought an iPhone 8, or I bought an Apple phone 8 or whatever the hell it's called. He's I bought the iPhone 8, and then Filbert's so what? I bought the iPhone 9, and then the whoever's working in whatever the store is comes out and slaps an iPhone 10 sticker on the door, and then they get run over by people, by a stampede of people going for the iPhone 10 right there.
Mm-hmm.
And this is moments after Filbert announced that he bought the new iPhone 9. So there's that, and then there's also they run into the equivalent of a Starbucks. I think it's called a Buzzbox. They run into a Starbucks. They run into the Buzzbox, and they get a bunch of coffee, and then they run into another Buzzbox, which is right next door to the first Buzzbox, and they drink coffee, and then they drink coffee again, and they run out, and Rocko is all shaky from drinking too much coffee. All kinds of things, but the Big Kids have the son who's the successful animator, and then Rocco's oh no, we have to get to some semblance. Also, at another point during the show, I didn't mention this before, but at the end of the episode where they're seducing, where Mrs. Bighead is trying to seduce Rocko, Mr. Bighead starts gets jealous, and he realizes that he's neglected his wife, and he starts doing these things that would turn her on. He's flicking his tongue at plates that she's throwing like a
pigeon.
Yeah, like pigeon.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he's breaking the plates, and she's getting turned on. And then later on in another episode, they turn on a tape, and it's just called Toads in Love, and it's and it's that moment, and even more so. So it's there's for some reason they have a sex tape of the Big Heads going at it. So it's implied. There's also other things like a Tunnel of Love thing where two rabbits go in and then they come out, and and they're surrounded by baby rabbits, and there's a guy behind them who's just giggling. So it's pretty weird. You could make that however you want to, but In the static cling, they have the sun. The sun makes the Fatheads cartoon. Rocko wants to just get something from like the time that from like the 90s where they came from, and um and they try to track down the sun because the sun went MIA. So the sun's on the lam. They go all around the world to try to track down Ralph, and they can't find him. Even people in Egypt who are building like statues of him don't know where he is.
Mm-hmm.
So and then they manage to find him making an ice cream in an ice cream truck, and the ice cream that he's selling is shaped like the Fatheads.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, "Oh, Ralph, can you make the big heads?" And he's like, "I really don't want to, but I mean, maybe I could. I mean, but like, there's just one thing." And they're like, "Well, what?" He's like, "Well, I'm not Ralph. I'm Rachel now."
Mm-hmm.
And like it pulls back to reveal that Ralph is now Rachel and he's transgender, or she's transgender. I'm not great with the way that with like if you're like with what becomes what. I'm not great with that. I'm sorry for anybody for anybody who's trans listening to this. I like I don't have everything together yet. I'm trying. I have friends who are trans and they're awesome people. I'm just not the best with who becomes who in that specific. But anyway, um so so anyway, Rachel just says, "Hey, well, I'm not Ralph, I'm Rachel now." And we get the big reveal and nobody cares, and they actually like Rocko, Filbert, and Heifer accept it. Filbert is even like, "That is so awesome." Like so it's the perfect way to do it like where nobody cares. I mean, of course,
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Bighead is the only one who cares. So this of course becomes a story about a father accepting that their child as is transgender, so it becomes even bigger. And eventually through the cartoon, because like Mr. Bighead, like he makes a big mistake that destroys Conglommo and therefore destroys the entire economy of the town of O Town, and it's all his fault.
Yeah.
So the only thing that could save it is a Fatheads reunion. So Rachel reluctantly agrees to do it, does it, and it does very well. And in the middle, and like Mr. Bighead does not want to watch this, does not accept it, like which harkens back to when Ralph had said that he wanted to be an animator. Mr. Bighead said, "I have no son."
Right.
And then when Rachel tells Mr. Bighead that she is no longer Ralph and now Rachel, Mr. Bighead's response is, "I have no daughter."
Mm-hmm.
So there's that conflict, and Mr. Bighead is watching the cartoon with a sack over his head the entire time
Mm-hmm.
as like a showing of intolerance and not accepting things the way that they are, and shame. And everyone is cracking up at the cartoon, and the cartoon adds a baby, and Rocko at first is pissed because he just wanted the Fatheads by themselves the way that they were, nothing new, nothing changed. But the baby is similar to the baby in Dinosaurs, where
Yeah.
where it physically abuses the parents in
Baby, you
like an
gotta love me.
exactly in like an itchy and scratchy way where they're
Yeah.
like beating the tar out of each other, and they're like, if it wasn't a cartoon they would be murdering each other, and it's funny. And the whole town is cracking up, and the monetary numbers are going up on the ticker, so it saves the town and it saves Conglomo and everything else, and like the Fathead saves the day. So Rachel's cartoon saves the day, and eventually there's so much laughter and everything, and you see Mr. Bighead's curiosity pour through in his eyeballs. They pour through the bag, and the bag gets incinerated somehow. Don't ask me how that happens. It's a cartoon. Cartoon logic is not the same as reality. If I hit
Yeah.
anybody with a sledgehammer tomorrow, I'm going to prison. So, but there is, but there's but in this particular incident, he sees the show and he realizes it's great. And then at the same moment in the show where the fatheads embrace their son as the son gets older, Mr. Bighead is embracing Rachel and accepting Rachel.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the perfect queer story to tell anyway. And Joe Murray has said that he, like, over the years that there's been points in time where he's thought whether or not, well, not wanted to, but he's thought whether or not he bring Rocko's. He feels like and he's not sure if it would be right, or he's not sure that they would be able to get away with what they did. And I think Static Cling proved that they could.
Yeah.
If they had the right backer.
Yeah.
So I would love to see another season of Rocko's Modern Life, because they could definitely get away with it.
Yeah.
As long as they got a lot of the same team. Obviously, they can't get Steven Hillenburg because he passed away, sadly.
Yeah.
But they could get pretty much the rest of the team back together.
Yeah. I think, even if they didn't do it necessarily as a kid's show, they could do it and release it. And the people that are going to watch it are going to be millennials anyway, because it's like what we grew up watching.
Right.
So they have an audience for it, like a big audience,
Yeah, I mean, and they have done that with Animaniacs. They brought Animaniacs back for a season. I mean,
and it was pretty good.
It was decent.
I watched some of the new episodes and it wasn't bad.
Yeah, I didn't watch all of it. I saw like half of it, and I thought it was mostly fine. There were a couple of jokes where I was like, all right. I figured they would do something like this. It's not the greatest, but it wasn't bad.
They had to do a little bit of topical humor to like bring it into this century,
Well, of course.
So
but there were certain things where I was like, okay, this is like, I get that they had to do this, but it wasn't executed the best way.
Yeah.
But like, that's what happens when you have a different, younger writing team. It's just like, they're going to do what they think the original show would be, especially if they're people who grew up watching this. They're going to do their best impression of the show, and it's not always going to land. But I thought the Animaniacs reboot was fine.
Yeah.
Like was it the best it could have been? I don't know, but for what it was good.
Yeah.
They have been. I think History of the World Part 2 premiered this week, or it's going to.
Really?
Well, they're doing it. They did it as a one-off series, and the trailer looked hysterical. If there's no Jews in space, then the show is crap. That's all that I could say.
Weren't they planning on doing a Spaceballs 2, The Search for More Money also?
They did a cartoon on
I know
G4,
they did a cartoon.
And the cartoon was okay.
Yeah.
But it was a I mean, we could talk about that at some point. Just Spaceballs in general.
Oh yeah, great movie.
Great movie. But I don't know. The cartoon was fine, but it was during G4's like dying days, so it only lasted as long as it lasted. But
yeah,
I think they did. I'm not sure if they did try to do the Search for More Money. I wouldn't be surprised if they did try and it didn't happen.
Well, no, I heard that they were going to, and then I don't know. It's like stuck in development hell. It might have been like right before COVID, so like COVID kind of killed the project.
Oh, maybe. Well, they did. Well, they did. They did History of the World Part 2 as like a variety show.
Yeah.
So and the trailer looked hysterical. There was like the peak was like Jack Black was Stalin and he was doing like a Les Mis kind of like song.
Oh my god.
So yeah, it like the whole trailer, I could not wait to see it. So it did exactly what it was supposed to do. But I think they could bring back Rocko's Modern Life, and in the right vacuum, and I think it could work. They tried to do things like that with Ren and Stimpy over the years, and Ren and Stimpy has its own problems with the show creator, John Kricfalusi. John K. That has its own issues with him, and the reboot of Ren and Stimpy that they did for Spike TV was just awful. The adult party cartoon.
That was not good. It was like way too like pornographic.
Obvious. Yeah, it was way too obvious and just not funny.
Yeah.
Like the
Yeah.
innuendos were what made it funny, and like
Yeah, it
the
wasn't an
team.
innuendo anymore. It was just like, oh, here's some fucking basically softcore pornography. Like,
Yeah, like the first episode, like the pilot is just openly just having, it's just like showing Ren and Stimpy having gay sex under the sheets, and it was like, that's not what made it funny. What made it
right,
funny was the implication.
right.
But anyway, I digress. Rocko's Modern Life could be done today.
Yeah,
I think that Static Cling absolutely proves that, and I don't see why we couldn't get another season.
yeah,
Um, I mean, there's just so many things littered throughout that show that were just these ridiculous, absurd innuendos that adults caught, children didn't, and now as the children became adults, the show has gotten better with age because now
yeah.
we realize what flew over our head, and we don't understand how that flew over the censors' heads or how the censors didn't care. But this, I can only say either the censors didn't notice things or the censors were presented with things that were worse and they like
Yeah, I think
weren't
that's
paying attention to things, or it was such a bad time for animation where like it needed a shakeup that they overlooked certain things.
I know that
Could
like
be a combination.
a lot of times like in the especially in the 90s like with video games and movies, they would like purposely like when they brought it to the censors to be rated, they purposely brought like worse scenes that they thought would eventually get cut because they're like, oh well, we can afford to lose this scene if it means that if we cut it, we can get a lower rating, kind of thing, you know, like because I know it happened a couple times. I believe like the Vice scene in Casino. That was like not supposed to be in the movie. Like I think Scorsese did that as like an extra. He's like, all right, we're gonna put this in, and if they tell us to cut it because it's too violent, then we'll just like that's something we can lose. It's not like super. It was something like that. So I don't know if it was that exact scene, but something like that. And it ended up making the final cut anyway. They like didn't care. Like
I don't know. I mean, that happened a lot of times.
yeah,
It was
yeah,
just the worst thing showed up.
yeah.
And often, I mean, they still do it, like, even with, like, South Park, where, like,
Oh
they'll
yeah.
run, like, two versions of a joke that, like, legal doesn't think that they'll get past it.
Well,
So, like, legal will tell them, oh, this isn't gonna work, and then they'll do something worse, and then the censors will pick the worst item.
yeah. They
That'll get
actually
into the show.
I was actually apparently South Park has almost like carte blanche on Comedy Central. Like they were talking about this like
Oh, I'm sure
on
that they
Rogan.
do.
They were talking about it on Rogan a few like they did the Protect Our Parks thing. So it was like Ari Shafir and
Well, I
uh
thought you were saying that, like, Trey Parker and Matt Stone were on an episode. I
no
was
no no
gonna
no
say,
no
how did I miss that one?
no. Well, I think they have been on the show, but it was like a long time ago, like
Oh, okay.
like years ago. No, this was like Ari Shafir and like a bunch of other guys, and they were basically saying like because like Ari Shafir, I think had a show on Comedy Central, and they would like pitch jokes to the network and be like, "Hey, can we get away with this?" And they'd be like, "No," and it's like, "Well, Cartman did it," and it's like, and the network's like, "Well, you guys aren't like South Park, like they have like free reign. They're the only ones that have free reign." So it
Oh,
was
I can
like
see that.
it was like a good like barometer for what they could get away with. It's like, okay, can South Park do it? No, then we definitely can't do it. You know, like
Yeah, well, that'd be safe to say that you
yeah,
definitely can't if South Park can't.
yeah. So, uh, yeah, I think that that's that again. That's such a unique like thing though because that's like it's like by far Comedy Central's most successful thing ever, pretty much that they've ever done.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean,
so
also, just the writing of Rocco's Modern Life was interesting too, because they would just they would take them out like Joel Murray would take them out to trips, like just to do things, or like he would call them writing trips, which I'm sure like just were various like things that were expensed to just get out of the studio for a while, and and then they would just eventually just pitch stories based on things that were surrounding them. So it would either come from, so that's why a lot of things would come from real life or just anywhere really. Just because they got that little reprieve and they were like, all right, it's time to do a writing trip, where it was just like, let's get the hell, like let's try to like not work from a day. Like let's just take a mental health break basically and see what happens.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, it's just such an interesting show, and like we had
Yeah.
all of the and like a lot of the animation was just like the classic like gags that you would see from just Chuck Jones cartoons and like
Yes.
Tex Avery and stuff.
Yeah, it was
Like
very
there's the
much
episode where there's the other I think she's another wallaby or something like that next door, and she's like the sexy one.
Melba
That
Toast.
yeah, Melba and
Melba Toast. That's her name.
Melba Toast. Oh god. And like Rocco is interested in her, and he's like he's got the hots for her and everything, and she's like so like Heifer writes like a dating like um what do you call it, like what do they call it, the classified ads that would be like he just wrote a dating ad for him, and he went on all these dates, and one of the dates turned out to be Heifer, who was like a stand-in, and that's where the tunnel of love thing happens.
Yeah.
But he's interested in he's interested in Melba, and there's like another part, I think it's in the same episode or another one, which gets into Filbert being into weird things. There's like we see two women like Filbert like Rocco's getting like a headshot, and he goes to Filbert, who has like a photo studio thing in his like house for some reason, and we only see the bottom, we only see like the legs and feet of these people, and you see two women leaving and giggling, and Filbert's like, all right ladies, bye, have a great day, it was a great shoot, and they're leaving the house, and then and like you see two like ladies like legs and feet, and then they're like followed up by like a male rabbit's feet, and every time we see rabbits in the show there's usually like a sex joke that's coming,
Yeah.
and they leave. We don't know what they look like, but the male feet are obviously rabbit's feet, and and they leave, and the women are giggling, and the male rabbit and like the male figure doesn't say anything, and then when Robert, who's Robert, when Rocco and Heffert comes into when they come into Filbert's house, they obviously see the models, and they come in blushing. So it's implied that that like something adult related in an industry that caters to that need may or may not have just happened at Filbert's house. So he may or may not have been doing a shoot for a dirty movie.
Yeah.
Or just whatever it was. I don't know. Maybe Filbert needed to pay the bill somehow. I'm not sure. I don't know. Nobody really knows.
Yeah.
But it's implied that that happened, and that Filbert doesn't just take headshots. We'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
So there's plenty of other things, or like there's like a weird like elephant birds or something like that, or monkey birds that Filbert
Yeah.
adopts, and it's implied that, well, how else could we get birds like animals that are half birds and half monkeys? So
Yeah.
there's quite a few interesting things. Or like in the seductress episode, um, she like asks Rocco if she has nice eyes, and her eyes like bulge out of her face, and they look like boobs.
Yeah.
And it's in front of Rocco's face, and she like rubs his face in them, and he's just like, you have great eyes, and she's like, how great are they, or something like that. But
Yeah.
it's
There's also the
there's a
recurring
ton of
character. There's the recurring character of like the fat lady that Rocco always like bumps into her ass or something like
yes, the
that.
hippo woman, and that's
Yeah.
Charlie Adler for you.
Yeah, and like he's always like shoving his face in between her butt cheeks and stuff like that. And she's always like, "How dare you!"
Yes.
And like, and then there's one episode where like she asks him to apply like suntan lotion. She's wearing like a friggin' like string bikini, basically. Like, so, and she's like a huge hippo lady. So she's just
Yeah.
like, this giant lady with a big fat ass. It's hilarious.
Yeah.
And it's very like, yeah, it's like, okay, like they got away with it, but
Yeah, it's pretty
that's pretty
obvious.
bad.
But yeah, long story short, Rocco's Modern Life, which I think we could like wrap it up now.
Yeah.
They also have their own hell, which is called Heck, but and it is what it is, and
And
like,
instead of the devil, they have Peaches who rules heck.
yes, Peaches.
And he's got like udders on his head. If I remember correctly, like he wears like looks like an executioner's robe with like a hood that covers his whole head. But in like one episode, it like gets like removed and is like literally his head is like udders or something like that. If I remember, it's like very strange.
Maybe this has a tie into Cow and Chicken somehow.
Oh, it could be.
I don't know. Anyway, to wrap up Rocko's Modern Life, this was an awesome show. If you like, I would be very surprised if whoever's listening to this show never watched this. But if you haven't, you should absolutely find episodes of this show. Whether or not you have, even if you have to get like a free trial of Paramount for like a week or whatever their trial is, it's worth it. If you're a Paramount subscriber, good for you. You can watch it whenever you want. If you're not, you could probably, I'm sure you could scour the internet and find a couple of episodes, or at least a few YouTubers who have had extensive things about this. But it's a great show. It's funny. There's a lot of crazy humor in there. As a child, a lot of things got over your head, and the show was funny already.
Yeah.
But as an adult, you'll appreciate it so much more. If you have Netflix, then definitely give the Static Cling special a listen, and it will absolutely make you smile.
Yeah.
Leapfrogs, that's the name of the episode where Mrs. Bev Bighead tries to seduce Rocko. Leapfrogs.
So there you go. Go
There
check
you
that
go.
episode out.
Yep. And Half in a Handbasket is the one that's also banned.
Yeah.
But I think you guys should take a look at this, and it's a lot of fun. And if you watched it, you watched it. If you didn't, find a way.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is us telling you what you already know. This is Why Does This Exist? We are a show about pop culture in very strange ways. Stay tuned. We will have more episodes coming up on some other strange things. And, everybody just have a nice day. Also, the Wacky Deli is the greatest thing ever. There is also a Rocko's Modern Life Super Nintendo game. It's not great. It's very hard.
No.
But,
well, and it's like one of those things. It's like, why did it need a fucking video game?
Yeah. But that's that. Maybe we'll
Yes.
do an episode on Nicktoons games. We've got plenty of ideas popping into our heads all the time. If you like us enough, give us some money. If not, just keep listening to us, and that's okay too. We'll get money on the ads, so we'll rake in some dough somehow, and we'll be able to persist. But at the end of the day, Rocko's Modern Life is a great show. Joe Murray is a great man, and Nickelodeon was great and groundbreaking in the 90s. I don't watch it so much now because I don't have children, and my nieces and nephews are too young, and I don't have cable, and I also would not currently watch Nickelodeon as a 30-something-year-old person. That is kind of weird. Anyway, this has been Why Does This Exist? I'm Chris.
And I'm Rob.
And remember, question everything.
Good night, everybody.